Good morning, students. Today I am going to explain the second lesson of economics. That is lesson number 16, economic liberalization and globalization. The points to be discussed today are new industrial policy, economic liberalization, its a definition, its advantages and disadvantages, privatization methods, its advantages and disadvantages. Economic liberalization and globalization. Take out your textbook and write down in the first para this question. Why did the government of India decide to implement the industrial policy in India? When India became independent in 1947, our government accepted the path of planning to achieve a speedy economic development. We know India got independence on 15th of August 1947. So India was under the control of British rule. So before that coming of the foreigners, India was a rich country. So when they left our country became poor. India became a developing country. So in order to achieve the path of economic development, the last chapter you have studied about economic development. What is economic development? It is the process in which there is increase in national income, per capita income and the living standard of the people. Simple meaning is in order to make India again richer, government of India has accepted the path of a planning. What is the meaning of planning? The process of thinking about the activities required to achieve a desired goal. So what is planning? The process of thinking about the activities required to achieve a desired goal. What is the desired goal? To achieve economic development, to make our country richer. So for this, India has implemented 5-year plans. 5-year plans means a government plan for economic development over 5 years. The first 5-year plan was in 1951 and 1951 to 1956. And the last plan was the 12th 5-year plan that was from 2012 to 2017. After that, government has stopped this 5-year plans. And the government has also implemented monetary policy, fiscal policy and industrial policy. Monetary policy means the policy related to that money. Fiscal policy means the policy related to the income and the expenditure of income. Industrial policy means the policy related to the development of industries. So in order to achieve economic development, India has implemented 5-year plans, monetary policy, fiscal policy and industrial policy. Although many of these plans were completed, we have seen that 12 5-year plans were completed, then also India could not achieve economic development. So the government reviewed the past policies and decided to rectify the past mistakes. So the government decided to find out the reasons and determined to give new form to different economic policies in order to rectify the errors done in the past. So when India became independent in 1947, our government accepted the path of planning to achieve a speedy economic development. A number of 5-year plans were implemented one after another to achieve economic development. And the government also implemented monetary policy, fiscal policy and industrial policy. Although many of these plans were completed, success was not attained in achieving economic development. So the government reviewed the past policies and decided to correct that past mistakes. To give direction to the future economic development, it decided to implement a new industrial policy, which includes liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So in order to that give a direction to that future economic development, government of India decided to implement that new industrial policy in July 1991, which includes liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Then what is meant by economic liberalization? Economic liberalization means government gradually, slowly decreases the restrictions and the controls imposed on private sector. Private sector means the industries which are under the control of a private person or individual, and encourages economic development. So why government decreases that restrictions and controls on private sector? In order to encourage economic development, that is economic liberalization. So government gradually reduces the restrictions and controls imposed on private sector and encourages economic development. This is known as economic liberalization. So what is meant by economic liberalization? Government gradually decreases the restrictions and the controls imposed on private sector and encourages economic development. Then which reforms are related to economic liberalization? So which changes are related to economic liberalization, or how did the government of India implement the economic liberalization? Write down in your textbook. The main economic reforms are related to liberalization which were made in the earlier period were as follows. So the economic reforms changes related to liberalization in the earlier periods, they were as follows. First one, there was reservation of 18 industries. That means 18 industries were under the control of a government. So the defense, atomic energy, etc., they were under the control of a government. For the industries other than this, compulsion was to take a government permission was eliminated. So 18 industries government kept under its control, and industries other than this, earlier it was compulsory to take a government permission. Now it is cancelled that. So now government kept 18 industries under its control. Other than this, earlier it was compulsory to take a permission from the government. Now it is eliminated or cancelled, removed. Then second one is that areas other than railways, atomic energy and defense were opened for private sector. So barring except railways, atomic energy, defense, they were kept under the control of a government, and other areas were opened for that private sector. So first one, reservation of 18 industries. Industries other than this, earlier it was compulsory to take a government permission. Now it is removed. Second one is that barring railways, atomic energy and defense, other areas were opened for the private sector. Third one, earlier it was a compulsory to register the industries. Now that it is a cancelled. Tradition of compulsory registration for industries was cancelled. Any person wanted to establish industries, earlier it was compulsory for them to register the industries. Now it is cancelled. Fourth one, provision to take a government permission for setting up industries which do not cause pollution and are not hazardous for environment was cancelled. That the practice of obtaining government permission for starting industries of a non-pollution and hazardous for environment was abolished. So which were the reforms due to which reforms are related to economic liberalization? First one is that there was reservation for 18 industries. For the industries other than this, compulsion to take government permission was eliminated. Then second one is that areas other than railways, atomic energy and defense were opened for private sector. So barring railways, atomic energy and defense, other areas were opened for that private sector. Earlier it was compulsory to register their industries. Now it is cancelled. Tradition of compulsory registration for industries was cancelled. Fourth one, for provision to take a government permission for setting up industries which do not cause pollution and are not hazardous for environment was cancelled. So what is meant by liberalization? Government gradually reduces the restrictions and controls imposed on private sector and encourages economic development. Then which are the reforms related to economic liberalization? First one is that except for 18 industries, the requirement of obtaining license for starting industries was eliminated. Except for 18 industries that are necessary to obtain license for starting industries was eliminated or cancelled. Then second one is that barring railways, atomic energy and defense, the rest of the areas were opened for private sector. Areas other than railways, atomic energy and defense were opened for private sector. The next one is that The practice of obtaining that a compulsory registration was cancelled. Earlier, it was compulsory to register the industries, and now it is cancelled. Last one, provision to take a government permission for setting up industries which do not cause pollution and are not hazardous for environment was cancelled. Then what are the advantages or benefits of liberalization? Mention, write down in your textbook, mention the benefits or advantages of a liberalization. As a result of liberalization, private sector has got an opportunity to make unrestrained development which lead to increase in production. So because of a liberalization, private sector, those industries which are under the control of a private individual, they got the chance to make a uncontrolled development that leads to increase in production. That is the first one. So what is that? As a result of liberalization, private sector was provided unrestrained, unrestricted development. This leads to increase in production. Second one is that global trade started getting in better. Global trade means a trade with other countries of the world got encouragement, and there has been increase in global trade. Because of that, now countries of the world, they are having trade relations with other countries of the world. So that is the second one. Global trade, foreign trade got boost, and there has been increase in foreign trade. Third one is that increase in foreign trade led to increase in foreign exchange reserves. Because of that increase in foreign trade, and there has been increase in foreign exchange reserves. There has been increase in that collection of a foreign currency. Last one is that internal infrastructure facilities increased. Infrastructure facilities means transport, communication, health, education, insurance, entertainment, etc. So internal that infrastructure facilities increased within the country. So what are the benefits or advantages of liberalization? As a result of a liberalization, private sector got a chance to make uncontrolled development that leads to increase in production. Second one, global trade, foreign trade got a boost, and there has been increase in foreign trade. Then third one, increase in foreign trade led to increase in foreign exchange. Last one, internal infrastructure facilities increased. So what is meant by liberalization? Government gradually reduces the restrictions and controls imposed on private sector and encourages economic development. Then what are the advantages or benefits of liberalization? As a result of liberalization, private sector got a chance to make uncontrolled or unrestrained development which leads to increase in production. Second one is that global trade, foreign trade started getting impetus. Impetus means encouragement or boost, and there has been increase in global trade. There has been increase in foreign trade. Then third one, increase in foreign trade led to increase in foreign exchange reserves. Then last one, internal infrastructure facilities increased. Infrastructure facilities means transport, communication, health, education, etc. has increased. The next one, what are the disadvantages or limitations of liberalization? First one, in spite of restrictions, the monopoly could not be checked. That we have seen that the government gave reduced that restrictions. Because of that, monopoly could not be checked. Monopoly means the control of an industry or service by only one company. We know 18 industries, they were kept under the control of a public sector. So the government could not control that monopoly. Then second one, it had focused on industrial development and neglected development of agriculture. So that private liberalization gave more importance to that industrial development. And as a result, there has been less development of agriculture. Then third one, there has been increase in disparity of income. There has been increase in that differences of income. The difference between the rich and the poor increased. The gap between the poor and the rich and the poor increased. Last one, because of increase in import and decrease in export, foreign debt has increased. So that import has increased. Import means just means because of foreign trade, purchasing things from other countries has increased. Export has decreased. Export means selling goods to other countries. Export is that are favorable for a country. Due to export, we can earn more foreign exchange. Value of money is value of Indian rupee is less than that foreign currency. So due to that, foreign debt has increased. So what is that last point? There has been increase in import and decrease in export. Due to that, foreign debt has increased. So what are the disadvantages of liberalization? First one is that a monopoly could not be checked. Second one is that liberalization gave importance to the development of industries. Due to that, there has been less development of agriculture. Then third one is that there has been increase in disparity of income, difference between the rich and the poor increased. Then last one, because of increase in import has increased and export has decreased. Due to that, foreign debt has increased. So what is meant by liberalization? Government gradually reduces the restrictions and the controls imposed on private sector and encourages economic development. This is called economic liberalization. Then next question, which reforms are related to economic liberalization? First one is that government there has been reservation of 18 industries and industries other than this earlier it was compulsory to take government permission. Now it is removed. Second one, that barring railways, atomic energy and defense, the rest of the areas were opened for private sector. Then third one, tradition of compulsory registration for industries was cancelled. Last one is that the practice of obtaining government permission for starting non-pollution and industries which are hazardous for environment was abolished. Then what are the advantages of liberalization? As a result of liberalization, private sector has got an opportunity to make unrestricted development, which leads to increase in production. Second one is that because of liberalization, global trade has encouraged and there has been increase in global trade. Third one is that because of increase in foreign trade, there has been increase in foreign exchange. Last one, internal infrastructure facilities has increased due to liberalization. Then what are the disadvantages or limitations of liberalization? In spite of restrictions, a monopoly could not be checked. Second one, it has focused on industrial development and neglected development of agriculture. Third one, there has been increase in disparity of income. Last one, because of increase in imports and decrease in export, foreign debt has increased. The next one is a privatization. What is the meaning of a privatization? The process in which ownership and management of industrial units under state control is handed over or transferred to the private sector is called a privatization. That means those industries which were under the control of a government were given to that private sector, private persons. So what is that privatization? Ownership and management of the industrial units were transferred or that handed over to the private sector. That is called a privatization. So those industries which were under the control of a government, they were given to the private sector. Earlier, that bank, etc., were under the control of a government. Now you can see that so many private banks are also there due to this privatization. Then mention the ways of that privatization. In which methods a privatization has been implemented. Firstly, those areas which are reserved for public sector are opened for the private sector. So those industries which were under the control of a public sector were given to the private sector. Second one is that the state keeps the ownership of state-owned companies under its control and gives the charge of a private companies. So those industries which were owned by the state, its ownership was kept by the government, but its management was given to the private sector. Or state keeps the management in its own hand, or the government keeps the management in its own hand and gave the ownership to the private sector. So what is that? Second one, state keeps the ownership of companies under its control and gave the management to the private sector. Or state keeps the management in its own hand and gave the ownership to the private company. So what is meant by privatization? The process in which ownership and management of industrial units under state control is handed over or transferred to the private sector is called privatization. Those industries which were under the control of government were given to private sector. Its ownership and management were given to private sector. Then mention the ways of privatization. Those industries which are reserved for public sector now opened for that private sector. Those industries which were under the control of public sector now given to that private sector. Second one is that state keeps the ownership of that state-owned companies under its control and gave management to the private companies. Or state keeps the management in its own hand and gives the ownership to the private companies. Then what are the advantages or benefits of a privatization? So mention the advantages or benefits of a privatization. There is increase in the number of production units in industrial sector because of a privatization. Now number of factories producing different goods have increased. There has been increase in the number of factories or production units. Then second one is that production has been increased in capital intensive and consumable in commodities. Now that capital intensive industries means the industries which need a lot of capital money, then raw materials, machineries, etc. that has increased. And the consumable commodities means consumer goods producing production unit has increased as a result of privatization. So what is the first one? There is increase in the number of production units. Number of factories producing different varieties of goods has increased. Second one is that which type of industries has increased? Industries of capital intensive and industries which produce consumer commodities have been increased. Commodities means in economics, goods used by the people are called commodities. People who purchases goods by paying the money, they are called consumers. Then third one, working capacity of public sector has improved due to privatization of a public enterprise. So because of a privatization of a public sector leads to that efficient and fullest utilization of a production capacity. So now working capacity of the public sector has improved because of a privatization. So what are the advantages? First one is that there is increase in the number of production units in the industrial sector. So many industries or factories have been increased. Second one is that which type of industries have developed? Capital intensive industries and industries which produce consumer goods have increased. Consumer goods means the goods which are used by the common people have increased. Last one, working capacity of a public sector has improved because of a privatization of a public sector enterprise. So what is meant by privatization? The process of transferring ownership and management of the industrial units under state control is handed over or transferred to the private sector. So what is privatization? The process in which ownership and management of industrial sector under state control is handed over or transferred to the private sector is called the privatization. Then which are the methods in which privatization has been implemented? Firstly, those industries which are reserved for public sector are now opened for private sector. Second one, state keeps the ownership of a state-owned companies under its control and gives the charges of management to the private companies. Or state keeps the management in its own hand and gives the ownership to the private companies. Then what are the advantages or benefits of privatization? First one is that there is an increase in the number of production unit in the industrial sector. Second one is that which type of industries have developed more capital intensive and industries which produce consumer goods industries has increased. Production has been increased in capital intensive and consumable commodities. Last one is that working capacity of a public sector has improved because of a privatization of that public sector enterprise. The next, what are the disadvantages or limitation of a privatization? So write down in your textbook, mention the disadvantages or limitation of a privatization. First one is that economic power has centralized as a result of a privatization. So concentration of economic power led to that evil of a monopoly. Evil of monopoly means we have seen 18 industries, they were under the control of the government. So evil of monopoly means that if they are producing low quality of goods or increasing the prices, that consumer will purchase goods from them. It will not affect them. So that is called the evil of monopoly. So power is in the hands of a government. So that leads to that evil of monopoly. Then second one is that privatization gave encouragement to large scale industries. Because of that, cottage industries have not developed. Cottage industries means the industries which are not making use of machines. For example, making that agarbatti, papad making, pickle making, etc. They are the cottage industries. So privatization did not give encouragement to cottage industries. And which industries got the benefit? Large scale industries got the benefit. So that is the second one. Cottage industries have not developed properly due to privatization. Only large scale industries have been benefited. Then last one is that prices have not remained under control due to privatization. So the government could not do anything to control the prices. So that led to the problem of a price rise. Now you can see that the value of money decreased and prices of the commodities increased. So the government could not do anything to control the prices. That led to that price rise. So what are the disadvantages or limitation of a privatization? Economic power has centralized as a result of a privatization, because of which evil of monopoly has increased. Then which industries got encouragement and which industries have not developed? Cottage industries have not developed due to privatization. Only large scale industries have developed. Then prices have not remained under control due to privatization. Daily that prices go on increasing. That this has led to the problem of a price rise. So what is meant by privatization? The process in which ownership and management of industrial units under state control is handed over or transferred to the private sector. Then which are the methods of privatization? First one is that those industries which were reserved for public sector are now opened for the private sector. Second one, state keeps the ownership of the state-owned companies under its control and give the charge of management to the private companies. Or state keeps the management in its own hand and give the ownership to the private company. Then what are the advantages of a privatization? First one is there is increase in the number of production units. Then second one, there has been increase in capital intensive and consumer commodities produced industries. Third one, working capacity of public sector has improved due to privatization. Then what are the disadvantages of a privatization? First one is that economic power has centralized as a result of privatization, because of which the evil of monopoly has increased. Second one, cottage industries have not developed properly due to privatization. Only large industries have been benefited. Third one, prices have not remained under control due to privatization. That led to the problem of a price rise.